Good morning, everyone. For Telesur, I'm Cody Weddle in Caracas, Venezuela. We start in Guatemala, where a former police chief has been sentenced to 90 years in prison for the 1980 massacre at the Spanish embassy in Guatemala. Yesterday, a Guatemalan court found Pedro Garcia Arredondo guilty of murder, attempted murder, and crimes against humanity. 37 people were killed at the Spanish embassy in Guatemala in 1980. Now 69, Garcia Arredondo was found guilty of burning the victims alive. The court's decision comes after 4 months of hearings. The tribunal outcome confirms the long-held suspicions in the country that the fire was the result of a clandestine police operation and that the participants prevented the Red Cross, emergency services, and journalists from entering the building. To Argentina now, with the latest on the death of federal prosecutor Alberto Nisman. Nisman was found dead just hours before he was due to testify at a congressional hearing. Now, he had previously accused President Cristina Fernandez of covering up suspects in the 1994 bombing of the Argentine-Israeli Mutual Association in Buenos Aires. With the latest, here's our correspondent Leo Poblete.
The Ministry of Security confirmed in the early hours of Monday morning the death of federal prosecutor Alberto Nisman, who was found dead on Sunday night in the bathroom of his 13th floor apartment in the Buenos Aires neighborhood of Puerto Madero by a single gun wound.
Early in the evening, the mother entered the house accompanied by one of the guards, finding the body of Nisman inside the room's bathroom, blocking the door. Authorities on duty were immediately notified, and in the presence of the judge and the prosecutor on duty, police personnel managed to enter the bathroom, and next to the body of Dr. Nisman, who was on the ground, a .22 caliber handgun was found beside a bullet cap.
Meanwhile, the opposition is asking for clarification of the facts and the continued investigation of the 1994 bombing of the Argentine-Israeli Association Mutual. According to the autopsy report, Nisman's death presented no signs of intervention of third parties.
We have to do two things. On the one hand, research specifically what happened in what appears to be a suicide, but I won't make any judgments until the investigations have concluded. On the other hand, the complaint he made, which is nonsense and which must be demonstrated that it is nonsense, which we will prove once everything is placed on the table for everyone to see.
Nisman was due to appear in Congress on Monday afternoon to explain the complaint he filed against President Cristina Fernandez last week over the signing of the Memorandum of Understanding with Iran, which he claimed was part of a government cover-up for Iranian suspects in the bombing. On express orders from President Cristina Fernandez, the Secretariat of Intelligence has been instructed to declassify the information related to the investigation of the Amia bombing, thus fulfilling the order requested by the special prosecutor of the case, the now late Alberto Nisman, before his death. From Buenos Aires, Leo Político Telesur.
Thanks to Leo. We turn to Colombia now, where the government and the FARC have released a joint statement following a meeting they held in Havana, Cuba. With more now on the statement, here's our correspondent Natalia Margarita.
In a joint statement, Colombia's government and the FARC said they have agreed that the main point to be addressed during the next cycle of peace talks would be the so-called end of the conflict, which includes the discussion on a definitive bilateral ceasefire. For Diana Sanchez, member of a 260 human rights organizations network, this was a highly anticipated announcement.
2 years of the peace process passed before this announcement was made. This is a political process, and I believe that if a bilateral ceasefire happens before a final deal is achieved, which apparently it's going to be this year, that is a good sign that the peace process is progressing and that it is sustainable.
In mid-December, the FARC called for a unilateral ceasefire, which, according to David Flores, has already had a positive impact on the lives of the people in central and eastern Colombia, regions where his organization monitors the human rights situation.
Farmers, indigenous people, and Afro-descendant communities from the 9 states of eastern Colombia, a region where the armed conflict has been very intense, have said this is the first time in years that they could spend Christmas in peace. They have been able to do their work, their daily work, as they want to, which is the humble people in the rural areas that want to be able to work, to be taken into account, to be able to live in peace.
However, there is a situation that has been raising concern among the population of those regions.
In our organization, the farmers themselves are the human rights defenders. So on the one hand, they tell us that the unilateral ceasefire has been complied with by the FARC. But on the other, they denounced the increasing militarization of the region, the large presence of troops, and the increasing bombardments and machine gunning.
The Broad Fund for Peace is expected to release soon a report on the impacts of the unilateral ceasefire at a national level.
Meanwhile, human rights organizations and peace activists are waiting with hope for the discussion on a bilateral ceasefire to take place during the next round of peace talks, scheduled to begin on Monday, February the 2nd. From Bogotá, Natalia Margarita, Telesur.
Thanks to Natalia. As the Ayotzinapa case fades from the front pages of Mexico's newspapers, social organizations and families of the 43 students maintained their demand for justice and the return of their loved ones. As our correspondent Clayton Kahn reports, they continue pressuring authorities to open an investigation into the role of the Mexican army.
Approaching 4 months since the 43 Ayotzinapa students were forcibly disappeared by police, these youth organized over the weekend a cultural event in the outlying Mexico City borough Milpalta, keeping alive the demand for justice.
They say that to forget means we are destined to repeat history, and we don't want to lose more friends, we don't want to die, disappear, or suffer any kind of repression. We want to have our rights and have rights over all aspects of our life.
Yet, in Guerrero, the memory of the missing students drives the families and civil organizations to conduct their own independent search, even as they confront growing threats and intimidations by what they believe are organized crime groups.
If we go and search for them, the criminals say they are prepared to kill any person that gets anywhere near where they are, or wherever we search for the students. But this situation doesn't scare us. We're going after our objective of arrest. Whatever happens is going to happen, and nothing more.
The citizen search was launched in reaction to announcements made last week by federal authorities that their lines of investigation were exhausted. However, legal representatives of the family say the authorities have evaded investigating the potential participation of the army.
At what level is the army involved? Well, we don't know, nor we are prejudiced or are we saying the army is responsible. What we are saying is that there are elements that involve the Mexican army and that the public investigator must investigate and clear up those elements.
Although federal authorities have denied the Army's role, they have ceded to demands to allow human rights organizations and the families of the students to search select military installations. However, when and how has yet to be determined. Clayton Kahn, Telesur, Mexico.
Thanks to Clayton. Tributes to civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. were held nationwide yesterday in the United States. Protests over the treatment of black people by police forces also continued across the country. Around 400 protesters blocked traffic in New York City as they walked around 60 blocks from Harlem to near the United Nations. They chanted, quote, "Black Lives Matter," as King's speeches blared from loudspeakers. The deaths of unarmed black men at the hands of police have sparked protests around the country in recent months. Those include the deaths of Eric Gardner, who died in July after being put in a chokehold in New York City, and Michael Brown, shot in Ferguson, Missouri in August. And staying in the United States, President Barack Obama will deliver his State of the Union address today. Now, we expect him to focus on issues like the economy and relations with Cuba. With an approval rating under 50%, Obama will give his annual speech in front of a Republican majority Congress. Polls also suggest that only 40% of people trust the head of state more than they do Congress. A majority of U.S. citizens believe that things are getting worse in the country. Only 39% believe that the country is heading in the right direction. And to Ukraine, the government there has announced a new mobilization of its army with the pretext of recovering control of Donbass. According to Russian newspaper Nezavisimaya Gazeta, today Ukraine will send additional military units to the conflict area in the east of the country. However, the country doesn't have plans to go behind the line of separation agreed on in Minsk. Kiev recognizes, though, that the line isn't well defined in some areas, particularly the Donetsk airport and some areas where the ceasefire is being violated. And in Guinea, children went back to school yesterday after 5 to 10 months when classes were canceled due to the Ebola outbreak. As students entered school, staff checked and recorded their temperatures as part of new preventative measures. Approximately 80,000 Guinean teachers have been trained on new hygiene protocols. Guinea recorded over 2,800 cases of Ebola and over 1,800 have died as a result of the disease. Plenty more on those stories and others at our website, telesurtv.net/English. Back with you in just a few hours with the latest headlines. For Telesur English, I'm Cody Weddle. Have a great day.